Life has a way of teaching us the most painful lessons about trust and family, and mine came in the form of a broken promise that had been nurtured for 4 long years. I was 20 years old when my world turned upside down, shattering my dreams of attending California Institute of Technology. My brother Jordan, just 10 months younger than me, had always been there, an ever-present shadow in my academic life. Our parents made the fateful decision to enroll us in the same grade, unknowingly setting the stage for years of constant competition. In every academic challenge, every test, every project, I consistently emerged as the victor, excelling not just in studies, but in everything I pursued. My heart was set on studying data science at Caltech. It wasn't just a dream, it was my calling, my clear and precise future. Jordan, on the other hand, would boast about becoming a pioneering microbiologist, making grandiose claims about changing the world through his research. But his words were just that, words floating in the air, never anchored by action or effort. Despite my academic excellence, my parents' support was withdrawn when it mattered most. During my junior year of high school, when my grades were soaring and Caltech seemed within reach, I sat down with my parents for what I thought would be a pivotal conversation. They promised, with such conviction, to cover my college expenses entirely. It shouldn't have been a burden. My father ran a successful business inherited from my grandfather, and our family had always lived comfortably. There was a twist of irony in our situation. Both my parents had paid their own way through college. My father, despite coming from wealth, had worked to repay his loans at my grandfather's insistence. This history planted seeds of worry in my mind, but my parents consistently reassured me, telling me not to worry about the financial aspects of my education. They guaranteed that when the time came, I would be able to attend my dream school without the burden of financial concerns. During my final year of high school, in the midst of applying to colleges, I believed their promises. For 4 years, they had repeated their commitment, making it as much a part of my future as my own determination. Then came the day that changed everything. I received my acceptance letter from Caltech, but instead of celebration, I was met with betrayal. My parents suddenly reversed their stance, refusing to pay for my education because Jordan had failed to get into Cornell University. They wanted me to attend a less prestigious school with him, to protect his fragile ego from feeling like a failure. The bitter truth was that Jordan's attempt at Cornell had been foolishly ambitious. His grades had never come close to meeting their standards. He had always been an average student, coasting through school without putting in the effort that such aspirations required. I don't mean to sound harsh, but reaching for the stars requires more than just wishful thinking. It requires dedication and hard work. When my parents delivered their verdict, asking me to sacrifice my dreams for Jordan's comfort, I refused without hesitation. My acceptance to Caltech was earned through years of dedication. I couldn't throw that away, regardless of my brother's situation. While I sympathized with his disappointment, I couldn't let it become the architect of my future. Perhaps if Jordan had shown me any kindness over the years, I might have considered it differently. But our relationship had been strained from the beginning, poisoned by our parents' constant comparisons. Despite my numerous attempts to build a bridge between us, Jordan maintained an inexplicable sense of superiority. To this day, I can't understand what fueled his belief that he was better than me, but it was a conviction he held onto with unwavering certainty. What made my blood boil even more was how my parents treated Jordan like he was God's gift to the world, reinforcing his baseless sense of superiority. Their constant favoritism left me feeling powerless and frustrated in ways that still ache when I think about it. As a child, I tried countless times to confront them about this unfair treatment, but they would dismiss my concerns with the same tired excuse, that as the older sibling, I should have known better. Instead of letting jealousy consume me, I found solace in confiding in my uncle, with whom I shared a special bond. But even his support couldn't change the fundamental dynamics of our family. When my parents asked if I was willing to sacrifice my dreams for Jordan's sake, my answer was an immediate and firm no. I was astounded by their demands. They said that if I did not accept their terms, they would rescind their promise to pay for my education. It was suggested that if I did not make sacrifices for my brother's happiness, they would not pay my tuition fees. I exploded with rage, and what followed was the worst argument we'd ever had. What they did that day was unethical on so many levels. They had fed me false hope for 4 years, which was the only reason I hadn't looked for jobs or internships to save money. I hadn't even explored student loan options or discussed them with anyone because I truly believed their promises. The reality of trying to work my way through college while maintaining the academic standards required at Caltech seemed impossibly daunting. I found myself in this devastating situation simply because my parents were so selfishly focused on Jordan that they couldn't spare a thought for my future. Arguing with them proved futile. I pleaded and begged, though it killed my pride to do so. But they remained unmoved, stubbornly insisting that I should give up Caltech because Jordan's emotional well-being was more important than my dreams. I tried desperately to make them understand that what they were asking wasn't a small sacrifice. It was asking me to completely abandon my future. But they wouldn't budge an inch, their minds seemingly made of stone. Finally, I realized that continuing to talk was pointless. Their priorities had been clear from the start, and I had been foolish to trust them. That afternoon, I packed my bags and walked out of their house, and they didn't even try to stop me. I went straight to my uncle's house and poured out the whole story. As I mentioned earlier, my uncle and I had always been close, and he had consistently shown me the understanding I craved from my parents. He had even tried multiple times to reason with my mother, his sister, urging her to understand my situation and consider my perspective. Though his previous attempts had failed, that day was different. I had reached my breaking point. When I arrived at his house, I was in such an emotional state that I could barely speak through my tears. But my uncle, with his characteristic patience, calmed me down and gave me time to collect myself and explain everything. After hearing my story, he said something that changed my life. He would cover my college expenses himself, and I didn't need to worry about anything. When I heard those words, my heart nearly burst with emotion and relief, knowing that my dreams wouldn't have to die after all. He helped me with my student loans and financial matters, and all my worries went away. My uncle kept his promises and was always trustworthy. Thanks to him, I was able to enroll at Caltech before the deadline and begin my college journey. As a successful dentist, he wasn't struggling financially, but it still moved me deeply that he chose to invest in his niece's future instead of his own retirement. I will carry this debt of gratitude in my heart forever. A year passed at college, during which I had no contact with my parents, and they made no attempt to reach out to me. I'm sure they knew what I was doing through my social media posts. Though I had blocked them, the family grapevine surely kept them informed. My uncle cut off all ties with my family after he found out how they treated me. I hadn't expected to hear from them anytime soon, but last week, they showed up at my college unannounced. Their sudden appearance caught me off guard, and while my first instinct was to avoid them, curiosity got the better of me. We ended up having lunch together, where they expressed deep regret about everything and said they wanted to repair our relationship. Something felt off about the whole situation, but I decided to give them a chance. Jordan wasn't with them, and when I asked about him, they said he was taking a gap year and planning to apply to colleges again. To my surprise, they started speaking negatively about Jordan, saying how disappointed they were in him. They even called him a real failure, claiming this was one reason they wanted to make amends with me. The whole situation felt increasingly suspicious, and by the end of the afternoon, my suspicions proved correct. They finally revealed their true purpose in visiting me. They had seen I was doing well in college and wanted to discuss something. They told me about an important investor they were courting, someone they desperately needed on their side. My parents' catering business was attempting to break into the upscale market, partnering with event management to host exclusive, high-end functions. They had been in talks with this investor, working out various details. A few days earlier, the investor had mentioned his youngest son was trying to get into Caltech, and my parents had proudly announced that their daughter already attended there. The investor had invited them to a business-related party and specifically requested they bring me along. He wanted me to meet his son and provide advice about Caltech. My parents had accepted the invitation but found themselves in a difficult position due to our strained relationship. Their real reason for visiting that day was to mend things enough to get me to attend this party a few days later. They believed this party could help seal the deal with the investor. Moreover, they wanted me to speak favorably about them to the investor and enhance their image. One might wonder what was in it for me. Well, my parents had an offer. They said they knew I had initially gone to my uncle for help, but now they were prepared to cover the remaining tuition and living expenses, and would pay double what was needed. The deal was simple: help them, and I'd receive double the money I needed for college. All I had to do was attend the party and paint a glowing picture of my parents to the investor. Honestly, it didn't seem like a bad deal, so I agreed. But I had something entirely different in mind. 3 days ago, I attended the party with my parents, ready to execute my plan and make them face the consequences of their actions. After promising to fulfill their request completely, I waited until they introduced me to the investor, then decided to tell him the unvarnished truth. I began by thanking him for helping restore my relationship with my parents, watching confusion spread across his face. Then I explained how my parents hadn't spoken to me for a year until they needed something from him. With calculated irony, I thanked him for giving me this opportunity to reconnect with them. I revealed everything: how they had fed me false hopes for 4 years about paying for my education, only to betray me at the last moment because my brother hadn't gotten into his dream school. I told him how they had demanded I give up my dreams to protect my brother's feelings, and when I refused, they cut me out of their lives. The entire room fell silent as I spoke, and my parents turned crimson, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Having said my piece, I simply called a taxi and returned to campus, a 45-minute ride away. Everything fell apart after that. My parents have been trying to contact me through new social media accounts and different phone numbers since I've blocked their original ones. They're blaming me for ruining their deal with the investor, who apparently has stopped all communication with them. But that's not what's bothering me, it's my uncle's reaction. A few days ago, I told him about what I'd done, expecting him to share in my satisfaction at finally getting revenge. Instead, he was deeply disappointed, telling me my actions were vindictive and cruel. He believed I should have simply declined to help them and left it at that. Since then, our conversations have become awkward and cold, and I'm feeling guilty about it. Am I the villain for exposing my parents at their business event and breaking my promise to help them? A week had passed since the party, and I was further confused as I heard different opinions from my friends about the justification of my actions. Finally, I decided to listen to my heart and asked my uncle if we could talk in person, not wanting to have this conversation over the phone. He agreed, and yesterday I visited his house, where the atmosphere was painfully tense. We had barely spoken in the last week, and it all made me feel uneasy. Finally, I broke the silence, telling my uncle that I didn't feel I needed to feel guilty or apologize to my parents. Since I truly respected his opinion, I wanted to explain my reasoning to him. When he showed willingness to listen, I began sharing my heart. I told him how my parents had made promises for 4 years, only to abandon me just to protect my brother's feelings. If they had given me any reasonable explanation, like financial difficulties, I might not have been so angry. But they had demanded I give up my dreams for Jordan's sake, then became angry when I refused. That's what truly hurt me, I explained. Though I already knew all this, I hoped sharing the emotional impact with my uncle would help him understand the depth of my pain. I also told him how I'd always been treated as less of a priority by my parents. No matter how hard I tried to make them proud, it was never enough. These experiences had left me harboring deep resentment towards my parents. So on the day of the party, I was determined to make them understand their actions were wrong and show them I could hurt them too if pushed. I refused to be their pawn anymore. After hearing me out, my uncle said just one thing: "If you truly believe it was right, I have nothing more to say." I was stunned. I had hoped sharing my emotional journey would help him understand that my actions came from a place of pain. Even if what I did wasn't right, I thought it should be forgivable if it helped me heal. I'm not a saint, and I can't always take the high road. And I couldn't let people walk all over me anymore. They're asking me to accept that manipulative deal and pretend to be on their side was insulting. I told my uncle bluntly that if he didn't want to talk, fine, but then I wouldn't accept his financial support either. It was a bold statement, especially since I had no backup plan and no idea what would happen if this fell apart. But when I said this, my uncle softened slightly and said I didn't need to be angry with him. He was just disappointed that I had chosen revenge, explaining calmly that I should have left the past in the past. Revenge isn't the way to move forward in life, he said, and I had to agree. I admitted that what I'd done probably wasn't right or ethical, but I still felt it had been necessary for me. And I wasn't going to look back now. While we couldn't reach a conclusion about whether my actions were justified, we at least managed to clear the air and process our feelings. By the time I left my uncle's house, we were joking and laughing together again. Though I'm not taking the situation lightly, I think everything is okay, for now. The only issue is my parents, who are still desperately trying to contact me. I keep ignoring them because honestly, I don't know what else to do. I figure I'll just keep ignoring them until they realize their messages are pointless. 10 days have passed since the party. After days of just bombarding me with messages, my parents showed up at my college this afternoon, demanding to see me. I told the reception staff I wouldn't meet them, but they insisted they wouldn't leave until we talked. Fearing they might cause a scene on campus, I reluctantly agreed to meet them at a nearby restaurant. This time, Jordan was with them, and what I saw was unsettling. He hadn't been wasting his gap year. He'd clearly spent it at the gym, transforming himself into an intimidating figure. Before I left home, we'd been similar in build, but now he was dramatically more muscular. He kept glaring at me, flexing his muscles in what felt like an obvious attempt to intimidate me. It was both ridiculous and frightening, because I had no doubt he would have hit me if given the chance. Thankfully, it didn't come to that. My parents have asked me on social media to retract what I said at the party. They wanted me to admit I had made everything up to preserve their reputation. They explained that the investor had completely cut contact with them since the party, and they wanted me to fix it. I firmly refused, pointing out that they knew everything I'd said was true. Once again, they tried to solve things with money, offering to write me a blank check for whatever amount I wanted. I stood up to leave, telling them that not everything could be bought, especially not me. That's when my father lost it. He slammed his fist on the table and shouted that I wasn't allowed to leave until this was resolved. The noise drew attention from other diners, but the restaurant owner, whom I knew, understood something was wrong and didn't intervene. At this point, I'd had enough. I wasn't afraid of Jordan. I knew the owner would call the police if he tried anything. So I confronted my parents head-on. I told my father he'd lost the right to tell me what to do when he cut off my college funding and I left home. I made it clear that I was an adult now, independent of them, and their rules no longer applied to me. When my mother started in about how they'd raised me and asked if this was my way of repaying them, I cut her off. I told them they'd done the bare minimum for me while treating Jordan like royalty. I'd held on to hope that they would eventually support me and help with college, but they couldn't even keep that promise. They had abandoned me, caring only about Jordan. After that, they had nothing left to say. I told them I was leaving and warned them that if they tried to harm me in any way, I would call the police and file for a restraining order. Then I walked out and returned to my dorm room. I planned to call my uncle later to tell him everything that happened today. It had been a month since that unpleasant discussion with my family, and I was busy with studies and exams. After that confrontation with my parents, they left me alone for a few days. I told my uncle about the incident, including my suspicion that Jordan came specifically to intimidate me. It might sound paranoid, but that's how I felt. Maybe I was being oversensitive, but I didn't want to take any chances. So I told my uncle I wanted to file for a restraining order because my parents' presence made me feel unsafe. He fully supported my decision and urged me to contact a lawyer immediately. Though I was nervous about the outcome, I started the process for the restraining order. As if on cue, Jordan showed up at my college that very day, demanding to see me. This time, I went down without fear, thinking I had no reason to be afraid of such a worthless person. That's when he finally showed his true colors and took a swing at me. Fortunately, the whole thing was caught on camera, which will make getting the restraining order much easier. Though I managed to dodge most of it, his punch still caught my cheek. It hurt like hell, but I was grateful it hadn't landed square on my face or broken my nose. That would have made it impossible to focus on my studies. I'm thankful that getting a restraining order against my family should now be straightforward. My focus now is on acing my exams and proving my worth through success. The restraining order has been granted, and my face is healing well. The only issue is that the order only protects me, not my uncle, so Jordan has started showing up at his house. I can't understand why Jordan is creating more problems when he's already in trouble for assaulting me. Maybe he just wants to show off his gym progress. He tried to intimidate my uncle the same way he did me, but my uncle is quite tall and wasn't fazed by his threats. Jordan demanded that my uncle talk to me, claiming I needed a friendly voice to make me think rationally. My uncle stood his ground, telling Jordan nobody gives orders in his house and demanding he leave. When Jordan got in my uncle's face, my uncle grabbed his arm and threw him backward, sending him sprawling into the yard. I found the whole thing quite amusing, though I told my uncle he could get his own restraining order. He insisted he could handle it himself. That's the latest drama with my family. I just hope they don't start trying to intimidate anyone else, like my classmates or professors. Sometimes I wonder if they think they're some kind of mafia family. Finals week is finally over, and I can breathe again. My final exam results exceeded all expectations. I ranked in the top 5% of data science majors. This achievement has opened up incredible opportunities for my future. Yesterday, the department head personally offered me a research assistant position for next semester. While the salary is attractive, I'm more excited about the hands-on experience it will provide. My uncle was overjoyed at my success. During a celebratory dinner, he became unusually emotional and said, "I'm so proud of you, and I'm grateful I could support my sister's daughter." His words brought tears to my eyes. The journey hasn't been easy, but I made it this far because he was there for me. There's more good news. I've grown close to a classmate named Michael from my data structures course. Like me, he has a complicated relationship with his family, which helps us understand each other better. The other day, while studying at a cafe, he nervously asked me out to dinner. Though it's not quite romance yet, I feel at peace when I'm with him. As for my parents and Jordan, I heard some interesting news. Dad's catering business is struggling severely. Apparently, the incident with the investor became industry gossip, making it difficult for them to break into the high-end market. Strangely, I no longer feel strong emotions about their situation. It's just another story, separate from my life now. Jordan still shows up at my uncle's house occasionally, though less frequently. I heard he started working as a trainer at a local gym. My uncle said something profound recently: we can't change the past, but we choose our future. You made the right choice. His words resonated deeply with me. True, my relationship with my parents and brother might never heal. But that's not necessarily a tragedy. Sometimes letting go of damaged relationships is part of growing up. Summer break starts next week. Michael and I will be interning together at a company in California. New challenges await us in a new environment. My uncle blessed our new beginning, saying, "Your generation has infinite possibilities. Don't let the past hold you back." Looking back, those dark days were signposts guiding me to where I am now. My anger and hatred toward my parents have transformed into a deep desire to cherish my own life. Now I have my loving uncle, hope for the future, and confidence to forge my own path. This is just the beginning of a new chapter in my story, with many more to come. Sometimes I still remember the past, but it no longer hurts. Instead, it reminds me how much I've grown. Michael told me, "You're incredibly strong, but even more than that, you're kind." His words made me blush. I can feel a serenity within myself that I never thought possible before. Tonight, I gazed up at the starlit sky and dreamed about my future. Whatever challenges lie ahead, I'm no longer afraid. I have the courage to walk my own path now. And deep in my heart, I know that's what matters most.